Alright, so Philip K. Dick's The Hanging Stranger, which was written in 1953, centers around Ed Loyce, who finds himself in something of a psychological thriller. You're not even really sure how to classify it, because you don't really know whether he's psychotic or whether he's actually experiencing any of these things, or whether it's more of a, I guess, a case of an alien invasion, of there being a larger conspiracy, a larger plot. And it starts with one night when when Ed Loyce is walking through the city, he sees a man who's been noosed. And when he alerts everybody to what has happened, they don't see what he sees, which they all look at him like he's crazy, and of course, as you can imagine, it escalates, and he's ranting and trying to get people to see what he sees. And eventually the police are called, and he thinks that he's going to be taken to a mental institution. But what happens is when he's in the police car, he discovers that the police officer has actually seen the hanging stranger as well. And now he's wondering if he's a puppet, if he's being used in some sort of strange experiment, if his senses are being toyed with in some way for a particular purpose. And then from there, it just goes downhill. I won't give too much of it away, but the gist of it is that he's discovering that there's a parallel reality that he keeps finding himself in, that mimics, that mirrors his world, but sometimes pulls down the mask and reveals its true nature, what it really is. And he's discovers, in fact, that he's surrounded by these insect-like extraterrestrials who have taken human form and who keep sort of sucking him into their reality for reasons that he doesn't really quite understand. He does get clues dropped to him along the way, that indeed he thinks that these creatures, based on his studies, have some possible biblical significance, that they are indeed demonic in some way. But he's not sure. And as I've mentioned before, this is a great example of the way that he balances out his very realist, very cold, factual voice as a writer with his very visionary and very poetic, almost like Percy Bysshe Shelley. You know, he has that whole other side of him that he combines these two into this sort of psychological thriller in which it delves more into psychology even than many of his other stories do. And one quote that stuck with me the most was, "The darkness seems so thick that it looks solid." And that's exactly like something you would imagine Edgar Allan Poe, or, as I've said, Percy Bysshe Shelley. And you just feel it. It's like that metaphor that he's using is kind of what the entire story feels like. It's so, it weighs on you so much, and you imagine it so clearly that it's like there is a kind of a heaviness. It's almost like that sense when you have sleep paralysis and something is on your chest. It's like it has that constant gripping sense, like you're being pulled along, and you forget that it is not real. And he's also just a very compelling character because he's a little bit more rough around the edges, right? He's more ambiguous in ways that I've described, that I've articulated, in the sense that you question his sanity. And he also creates this world that at least alludes to this sort of trauma-based mind control. This breaking down of the mind, the breaking down of the senses in a way that you either think is going to lead to some kind of insight, some sort of deeper insight into something, or doesn't actually mean anything. You don't really know. It's like, but like a lot of these drug trips that we hear about, you get the sense that it's opening a gateway into a reality that might actually be in a higher level, a more advanced kind of level, and but it also has this whole other side of it that is much more you think is much more primitive. You think it's dealing with forces that perhaps have been around much longer than even human beings have, and that's why the issue of fallen angels comes into question in the story. And so you don't know whether he's really the only person that's really a victim of these forces, or whether the entire human race, for its entire history, has been at the receiving end of a lot of their conspiratorial behavior and their will to try to either trick humanity or completely destroy it, for reasons that we can't really fathom. And it's one of, I would say, the most enjoyable of the stories, because it has this way of making your brain feel like very foggy, like you feel like something is weighing on you, and then when it's finished, it's like this peak of sunlight just comes through, and you're like, wow. And I won't give too much of it away, but it's like you're taken through an obstacle course and you're brought out the other side. And I would highly recommend it. It's definitely up there with his best stories.